Hey guys, today we're going to be looking at cutting and printing lino. So first I have my image. I've cut it to the same size as my lino tile. The image is based off a Roy Lichtenstein painting called Drowning Girl from 1963. So smooth side of my lino facing up, rough side facing down, and I'm going to cover the entire back of my piece of paper with pencil. So I'm using 6B pencil here because it is dark and it is soft. I'm going to cover every inch, pressing relatively hard, and this is going to help us to transfer our image to the tile. Just a quick note that I should have reversed this image or flipped it in Photoshop before printing it, and you will see why later. So now I'm going to get some tape and just roughly tape my image so that it sits perfectly on top of my lino wherever I want it to go. So once I've taped that on, I'm going to get a regular ballpoint pen. I just have this pink gel pen lying around, and I'm basically going to trace all the lines on the work. I'm going to trace the outlines of shapes, such as the eyebrows, without coloring them in or filling them in. You don't have to worry about pressing ridiculously hard, just reasonably firmly, and this will transfer the image over to the lino. Once you've done all the tracing, it's time to take off the tape to reveal your transfer. So this looks pretty good, and I'm going to get a marker now, and I'm basically going to go over all my lines again, and I'm going to fill in any areas that are dark on the original image. So you can also use this time to add any lines that you missed, make any adjustments as well. So before we get to the cutting phase, I just want to show you guys a couple of safety tips. This is what we use for ink rolling, but it can also be used as a way to keep your lino still while you're cutting, and this can help you avoid any accidents. So what you're able to do is put your lino up against the side there to keep it flush, and then you can cut. Notice that we're doing this so that you can cut away from yourself. Really important that you're always cutting in the direction opposite from your hand. We also have these little red tools, which can be used to hold the lino in place. Because this protects your hand, you can cut in the direction of your hand. Just a quick tip on safety here. So the way you see me cutting now is something you should never do. It's a good way to get injured, so please avoid cutting towards yourself. Instead, cut away from yourself. Now sometimes this might seem tricky, but all you need to do is readjust your position to cut away from yourself. So now we're up to the cutting phase. Each of you will receive some lino tools, some cutting tools. I'm going to be using a thin, sharp tool to outline my lines before I cut areas that are bigger. So what you're going to notice is I'm going around my lines, not on them. You don't want to cut on your lines, you need to cut around them. This means that the lines that you want to print later on will be raised. So you'll see I'm going to go carefully around all of these lines. And I'm doing that first before I cut out any big sections. It's really important that you take your time here, you're not rushing, because this is the part where mistakes are going to look really silly. So once you've outlined all your sections, you can get a larger cutting tool and cut the inside sections that are larger. So we've got this nice fat lino tool, and I'm going to cut bigger sections. Just making sure to stop early before your smaller incision. Again, I go around the outsides first, and then I will cut the inside. So now we are up to printing, and I'm just showing you how we set up our area. So on the right, or your right, there is a wet section. Okay, that's where we ink up, and that's where things get really messy. Then on the other side of the table, you'll have a dry section. That's where you're going to do the printing. So here's my wet area set up. I have a stack of paper that I will need, and that's scrap paper. I have some ink, I have my palette knife, I have my roller, and I have a little rolling board thingy. So before I start inking up, I'm going to show you quickly how to register. What you're going to do is place your lino print exactly where you would like to print it on a piece of paper, and you're going to stencil around that with a marker pen or something similar. This is going to be used as a guide on where you will be printing your lino. Now I'm going to ink up. So I'm getting rid of my register, getting it out of the way. I'm going to get about a smear of black ink and then put it on my rolling board. Be really careful not to get ink on your hands. Now I've got my roller and I'm going to ink up. The secret is that you need to roll until you start hearing a tacky noise. You might be able to hear that now. Now you can roll on your lino and cover it with ink. Make sure this is on a scrap piece of paper. You're going to need a new scrap piece of paper every time you reapply ink to your lino. So you want to press fairly firmly, and you want to make sure you've got plenty of ink on there, but you also want to avoid oversaturating. Once you feel like you have enough, carefully slide your lino print over to the edge of the table and lift it very carefully, placing it on your register that you made earlier. Move this over to the clean dry section. Now we're ready to print. So I've got my lino piece on a registered piece of paper, and what I'm going to do is carefully place the clean piece of paper I want to print on over the top of that piece of paper so that it matches. Now we're using this tool called a baron, which will help us to transfer the image across. So I'm really putting my shoulder into this, and I'm applying a lot of pressure, as you can tell by the shaking camera. So the idea is that you've pressed every corner and every section, otherwise areas of your print might not show up. Make sure you hold your print stable with your other hand. Now you peel and reveal, and we have our first lino print. It's important to note that the first print usually won't be the most perfect, and that's why we make many prints, adjusting each time with the amount of ink or how firmly you transfer. To point out that this image has printed in reverse, in the wrong way, and that's because I didn't reverse or flip the image in Photoshop before I began cutting. So now we have a cool image that could be used on a t-shirt, could be printed on paper, could be tiled, could be used to make stickers. Enjoy!